Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and I'm once again joined by my friend Jeremy, who you might remember from my review of the first Gremlins movie.
Hi, everyone.
And we're, of course, reviewing the sequel to Gremlins, Gremlins 2, the new batch. Now, this is once again directed by Dante, who directed the first one, along with movies like The Burbs and The Howlin' and Piranha and many others. So what do you think of Gremlins 2?
Well, it's certainly a lot goofier and lighthearted than the original, but, I think it's very funny, and, it's got its great thrilling moments, and its cute little gizmo moments, so yeah, I enjoy it very much.
Oh yeah, it's definitely, the first one was a comedy too, but the first one was also very much a horror film.
Yes.
Obviously a kid's horror film, but it was still a horror film. This, I guess you could say it's also a horror comedy, but it's much more comedy than horror, I would say.
Oh yeah, it's like I said, it's a lot goofier than the original. One of the Gremlins is literally just a cross-eyed idiot.
Yeah, and it also really does have the feel of like a live-action cartoon.
Yeah.
In fact, you have Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck actually appearing in the beginning of the film, and then if you watch the end credits of the movie, during the end credits, you have Daffy Duck show up going, what are you, basically berating you for still watching the credits.
Yeah. Moments
in the film that are just so cartoonish, like, okay, you had the Bat Gremlin who, when he smashes out the window, it's the Batman symbol. Why don't you, since I always explain the plot of the movies whenever we do movie reviews, why don't you explain the plot?
Sure, with pleasure. Well, this time, the Gremlins are taking over a big building in New York City. In other words, they've hit the Big Apple. Yep, those pesky Gremlins are at it again, and basically run amok and terrorize this giant corporation. And it's up to Billy and the rest of his friends to stop them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
And also, I would say, once again, the acting, just like in the first one, is great. Zach Galligan does a great job as Billy. Phoebe Cates does a great job as Kate.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, you have John Glover as the character of Daniel Clamp, who is basically a parody of both Donald Trump and Ted Turner, basically.
Yeah, I would say so.
And Clamp is, he's a douchebag, but he's sort of a likable douchebag.
Yeah, I'd say he's pretty likable. He is pretty selfish and self-centered, but he's still trying to do good.
It's funny, you can tell he does care about people, but at the same time, there are points where he almost seems to care more about his self-image. You have that moment where, when the Gremlins are, attacking the building, he knows people have probably died, and he's like, oh, the people in this building, they're real human beings, real lives. Do you have any idea what kind of lawsuits we're looking at?
Yeah, I was about to mention that too. He's just... Yeah, he definitely thinks of his reputation first and foremost. Yeah,
I love the scene where he's throwing that one gremlin into the paper shredder and it's getting cut up and it's pulling his tie in. He's like, not my tie! He's not worried about, getting, his fingers are accidentally caught in the paper shredder. He's more worried about his tie.
Yeah, he wants to be the hero of the whole piece, and especially he definitely lights up when Billy says, oh, sir, if you can pull this off, you'll be the man who saved New York City. And
I almost want to say he is sort of morally ambiguous. He seems to really care about people, but, it's also, when Billy says that, it's more so, holy shit, I'm gonna look like a superhero to the people.
He's a good character, I would say.
Yeah, he is a good character. I think John Glover almost steals this movie in a lot of ways.
I would agree with that. And I've had the pleasure of meeting John Glover when he was in a Broadway show earlier this year. I went to the stage door to get his autograph a couple times, and I'd also sent him a little fan letter to the show. And when I went to get his autograph, he came, I saw him walking, and I'm like, oh, John Glover? And he's like, oh, hi. And, I was kind of, nervous, and I was kind of starting a bit, and he's like, oh, don't be nervous, is it me? And he puts out his hand, he's like, hi, I'm John. And I say, oh, I'm Jeremy, and I shake his hand. And, he signed, one of the things I had him sign was a little mini 8x10 photo of the poster for Gremlins 2, the new batch. He signed that. And then I had him sign this Tales from the Crypt logo photo. He was very nice.
I've seen all the episodes of Tales from the Crypt, but it's been a long time. Which episode was he in?
He was in the episode where he plays this mortician. The kids break into the morgue and they see him.
Yes, I love that one. Yeah, I forgot that was John Glover, actually.
Yeah, they see him having a relationship with one of the corpses.
Yeah.
And, I asked him about that episode, and he said he doesn't remember too much about it, but he said the kids were great to work with. And he went into the stage door, and then a few minutes later he comes back out and he says, "Jeremy? Oh, is this you?" He was holding up this letter I had sent him. And I'm like, "Oh my God, yes, that's me." And, I sent him through the mail 2 index cards to sign and some questions. So he signed the index cards, and, he said, "I'll try to get to your questions." And, he was just, such a great guy. And I actually took a photo of him holding up my letter, which was just fantastic. That's never happened before with a celebrity I've met and or written to.
And then, of course, you have, Dick Miller and Jackie Joseph coming back in this movie as the Futtermans.
Yeah.
And Dick Miller, Mr. Futterman, he's kind of a badass in this movie, especially towards the end where he goes into the clamp building to basically kick the Gremlins' asses.
Yeah. And
you almost get the idea that in his mind, he's probably thinking that he's going to get revenge for what they did to his living room.
Yeah, and you can also tell he's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
He's definitely very paranoid, although he has a very good reason to be so.
And then you had the character of Marla.
She does a great job. I mean, the character is definitely very bitchy and sleazy.
And just vapid.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Poor Billy, she's constantly, barking orders at him, and, even though he says, "Oh, I'm doing my best," she just bluntly says, "Do better." Let's not forget to mention how she hits on him, and at dinner she definitely gets a little inappropriate.
I love when Billy leaves and the waiter goes, "How about some horn?"
Yeah, I cracked up at that moment.
One character I want to point out is Foster, who's sort of like the underling of Daniel Clamp. He is such a piece of shit.
Yeah, he's a total asshole. I believe he's played by Robert Picardo.
Yeah, and Picardo does a great job in the movie, but he is just such an asshole.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he represents sort of like the sleazy businessman.
Yes.
Whereas Clamp almost represents that, but Clamp's at least a little more... He's nicer, at least, and you almost get the idea that Clamp has been sort of corrupted by the world of business a little bit, but it hasn't, destroyed his humanity. Whereas you look at Foster, and it's this guy has almost no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
I mean, you could argue that he's just doing his job, but at the same time, he definitely goes overboard. I mean, okay, maybe that employee shouldn't have been smoking inside the building and taking an unwarranted break, but... yeah, just firing him right off the bat, that seems a little harsh.
Yeah, and I feel like we talked about some possible social commentary with the first Gremlins. I do think there's some definite social commentary here about sort of the idea of a soulless corporation and the idea of how heartless, businesses and corporations can be. Mm-hmm. Once again, maybe I'm reaching a little deeper than Joe Dante intended, but... I feel like you could definitely see that, though, with this movie. Obviously, it's done in a very funny and satirical way, but it's still... If you look at sort of the subtext, there is sort of a serious undercurrent there, though.
Yeah, I guess so. But the guy played by Robert Picardo, like we've said, he's a total jerk, and I'd say he gets his comeuppance in the end.
Yeah, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, basically in the film, there's a female gremlin who throughout the movie is trying to rape him, basically. And she kind of succeeds at the end, but he does have that look on his face alright.
Yeah, it's why would you give in to that?
I don't know, maybe he's a pervert.
It's just bizarre. Yeah, I also wanted to mention about how Robert Picardo's character is a dick. I mean, at the beginning of the movie... he starts, berating Billy, all because he put a little plant on his desk, and then starts insulting, the drawing he did of his hometown. It's come on, that's just bullying.
And what's even more hilarious is then he goes to that lame-ass painting of those, triangles, and he's we only have art from recognized artists, authorized.
Well, only, how does a painting get authorized exactly? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Basically, it has to be art that's not art.
Yeah, I guess so. Boring art, I guess.
And then you have, like, cameos from, like, Leonard Maltin, who plays himself in the movie. We have this almost, like, meta moment where he's talking about the movie Gremlins and how it's been re-released on video, and he's bitching about the movie Gremlins, and then actual gremlins attack him. But that scene always made me wonder, like, okay, so does a movie called Gremlins exist in this universe or something? And then, of course, you have another meta moment where, like, the movie just starts glitching, like, the film gets fucked up, and the whole idea is it's Gremlins messing the projector, and then you have Hulk Hogan show up out of nowhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's
and that's a funny scene.
Yeah, I'd say this movie is definitely full of surprises.
You think the Grempster can stand up to the Hulkster, and he starts ripping his shirt off. And of course, the great Christopher Lee is in this movie as Dr. Catheter, which you were pointing out to me what catheter actually is.
Yeah, I mean, I always found it funny that his name is Dr. Catheter, considering that a catheter is a instrument used by doctors to help patients pee.
One thing I want to point out about Christopher Lee being in this movie is he was also in Howlin' 2, which was a sequel to Joe Dante's The Howlin', and that is not a film that Christopher Lee was proud of at all, and he actually went up to Joe Dante and apologized for being in Howlin' 2. Actually, it's funny, you've seen that documentary series that Christopher Lee did, 100 Years of Horror?
Yes, I have.
In the episode that was about werewolf movies, Christopher Lee actually says, I was in a werewolf movie myself called Howlin' 2, but the less we know about that, the better.
He's right.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie, but I do remember Christopher Lee having to wear those stupid freaking glasses, and...
Yeah, I also want to point out his strange obsession with collecting germs. I mean, his secretary just sneezes into a tissue and he just goes, "May I have that? Thank you." And he puts it in his pocket, and I'm like, what the hell do you want that for?
I also loved, like, when Christopher Lee's character is like, well, we can't let them get away. All they have to do is eat 3 or 4 children, and they'll be the most abominable publicity. He cares more about the bad publicity than he cares about this thing, like, actually eating 3 or 4 children, which would be a horrible tragedy. But it's like, oh yeah, that would be bad, but what would be even worse is the publicity. I also love that one part where he's carrying around the freaking, the pod from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Which was a nice little callback to when Billy and Gizmo were watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers in the first film. And there actually are some nice little callbacks to the first film. Like, if you look at some of the TV modders in the background, you see, like, It's a Wonderful Life playing on TV. And then speaking of that, I think it's interesting how the first one was very much a Christmas movie, but this isn't. Like, I think that's interesting, doing a sequel to a Christmas movie, yet not making it a Christmas movie.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they just wanted to try something new.
Yeah, and what I love about this one is it really does something new.
Yeah.
Like, in a lot of ways, I would actually say it's sort of a parody of the first one.
Yeah, I mean, they do parody it, and one thing I want to bring up is how they point out one of the film's biggest plot holes, which is, of course, it's midnight somewhere in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a great scene too, where they're basically pointing out all the plot holes of the first one in the second movie. Yes. Like, there's a lot of really funny meta jokes in this, but what I like about it though is it doesn't feel mean though. It doesn't feel like it's making fun of the first one in a mean-spirited way. I mean, obviously it's making fun of it, but not in any way that's mean-spirited. And then you have a parody of that really depressing scene from the first one where Kate's talking about why she doesn't like Christmas. There's a scene in the movie where she talks about something that happened to her on Lincoln's birthday, and it's clearly meant to be a spoof on that scene from the first one, and then Billy just shuts her down.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that was pretty funny, and also it's like, you know, I mean, there was obviously the urgency of the situation, so that's why he did it, and it's like, yeah, the story's kind of out of place, but, I mean, I guess that's what they were spoofing, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I believe I might have mentioned this in our review of the first one, but, you know, maybe this parody is also spoofing the fact that the scene in the original where she's telling the sad Christmas story almost got cut.
And then, of course, you have the Gremlins in this film, which this movie really does sort of... It gives the Gremlins sort of a new look. Like, each Gremlin has sort of its own individual look. Like, you have Gremlins of different colors, but you also have... Because you have a moment in the film where the Gremlins break into the lab and start eating all the genetic stuff, which mutates a lot of them. Like, Stripe in the movie ends up getting mutated into a giant spider, and you have a, like, electrical gremlin, and we mentioned the female gremlin, and... but even before that, you have some gremlins with their own unique personalities and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I as I might have mentioned before, I just love the one that's like the cross-eyed idiot. You know, he's very goofy.
Yeah.
Very energetic.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's that one, and then there's also a gremlin that's just outright stupid.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you have another gremlin who looks like a stereotypical, like, tough guy, sort of.
Big and bulky.
Yeah. And even Stripe, even before he becomes the spider, they give him a much different look in this one. He's a lot more vicious looking. Yeah. And almost, there's something almost amphibious looking about him.
And his stripe is black this time instead of white, which was in the first film.
Well, also, it's not even... In the first one, it was hair. In this one, it's actually, like, spikes coming out of him. And then you have a brain gremlin in this. Like, he drinks a formula that makes him super intelligent. And I love when he drinks it, all of a sudden glasses magically appear on his head.
Those.
Yeah.
And I just find it hilarious how this smart, sophisticated voice is coming out of this, you know, monstrous little body. It's like, how did that happen?
Fred, what we want is really what everybody wants, and what you and your viewers have. Civilization.
Yeah, civilization.
And he just shoots that one gremlin. Now, is that civilized? No, clearly not. Fun, but I know said civilized.
Let's take this fellow right here.
And one thing I think is interesting is Stripe really isn't the villain of this one, or isn't really the leader of the Gremlins. Really, if anything, I would say the Brain Gremlin is kind of the leader in this one.
Yeah,
but he's not, like, as outright evil as Stripe is. He's just sort of, like, kind of goofy, even though he's very intelligent.
I agree.
And I love how at the end, when he's melting, he's still singing the New York song. Which, that's something I think is interesting, that the Gremlins, even when they're dying, are still having a good time.
Yeah. They party till the end.
Like the one moment where the one Gremlin's melting and it's spoofing Wizard of Oz.
Yes. That was pretty funny.
Yeah. And you have a lot of great, like, little movie homages in this. Like Wizard of Oz, you have an homage to Marathon Man, where the crazy gremlins going, "Is it safe?" And,
well, they did. I remember the Gremlins were watching one of those old 50s monster movies.
Oh, yeah, that was Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Yeah, they were watching that, and then, of course, we already mentioned, like, the little Invasion of the Body Snatchers reference.
Yeah, when Christopher Lee's holding the big pod.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a little reference to, like, Alvin and the Chickmunks, where the two monkeys get out, and the two twin scientists is like, "Theodore, how'd you get out? Alvin, put down that DNA." And then just, like, the effects work in this movie is amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, the Gremlins look really realistic, and, of course, at the end where they're melting, it's some great practical effects.
Yeah, nice and gory, and, you know, they're reduced to this horrible green sludge. It's all icky and disgusting.
Mm-hmm. And then I also loved the vegetable gremlin.
Yeah!
Yeah, that was a cool one, and
the bat gremlin, the spider gremlin, the electric gremlin. Yeah, I just wanted to mention the bat gremlin turning into pretty much a stone gargoyle. That was a really cool effect.
That was.
I think they pulled that one off very well.
And to go back to movie references, I forgot to mention, like, when Gizmo's running around like Rambo.
Yeah, that was a good, and I just love the cute little training montage where he's punching the punching bags. You know, when these gremlins form and, you know, basically are born, they seem to already know how certain things work. Like, you know, one of them knows already how to work a microwave, the other one kind of knows how to... I mean, some of them know how to, like, work the elevator or tamper with it. It's like, how do you guys even know what these things are when you were just born, like, a few minutes ago?
Like, and then you had the one moment where the Gremlins get a tattoo of the Warner Brothers logo. How do you even know what Warner Brothers is?
How do you even know what a tattoo is?
Yeah. How do you even know when they're spoofing Phantom of the Opera? How do you know that?
Yeah.
How do they know the song New York, New York?
I was just about to bring that up.
Maybe they're born with the knowledge of certain things.
Yeah,
because I kind of got the implication with Stripe in the movie, since he remembers Gizmo, that the Stripe of this movie is sort of a reincarnation of the Stripe from the first one, so
maybe.
he probably has the memories of the Stripe from the first one.
I guess.
I also loved the crazy gremlin when he's in Mogwai form at Billy and Kate's apartment. When Kate calls him Gizmo, you actually hear him sort of say, "I'm not Gizmo." Yeah, didn't you say you wrote to Joe Dante?
Yes, I did, and I sent him some pictures, which, when I used to write fan mail, I used to print photos on regular computer paper, and, that's the only way I knew how to do it back then. So I printed a bunch. I printed photos of the posters for Gremlins, Gremlins 2, Piranha, and I think a few others, and I sent them off, and it took a long time, because I remember when he responded and he signed them and he sent them back, I had forgotten I had ever sent them out.
That was our review of Gremlins 2, the new batch, and